Hi everyone, so for my English 153 project, another portion of my proposal is to create a photo and word collage based on the experiences of our characters, Audre Lorde and Zami, A New Spelling of My Name, and Pecola in the Bluest Eye. So the first part or aspect of my photo collage that I'm going to begin with is the word skin. So obviously, systematic racism is in place because someone is not white. So in this case, both of our characters are African American. The color of their skin is how they're being discriminated against, in addition to other things I will get into the video. So specifically for Audre Lorde, a big aspect of how she is systematically basically prejudiced is in her work. So she has a hard time gaining employment right away because she is an African American woman and her skills aren't seen as valued or important to the kind of job that she believes she can do. So therefore she is isolated in terms of how much money she can earn and what kind of benefits she can get from a job. So moving that into kind of this other systematic racism of money. So cents. Audre Lorde is definitely not paid well, even whenever she gets a job as a librarian. She's constantly living from paycheck to paycheck, and clearly that is a form of systematic racism because she is economically unable to afford the things she needs, sometimes even basic necessities, such as food. So food kind of fits into this collage because unfortunately if she doesn't have a good job and she isn't making money, it's hard for her to afford food, and food is obviously a basic necessity that you need to live. There's brief moments in the book where it talks about her stealing food from outdoor vendors and almost getting in trouble for that. So that's another form of systematic racism in terms of economy. Moving on to that, we're going to talk a little bit about health. So basically, there's a very big, it's not identified a lot, but a part in the novel where Audre Lorde becomes pregnant and essentially has to have an underground abortion. And after this takes place, she is very messed up psychologically for a while. And this is another point in the novel where she goes through this episode of isolation. And it makes you think in terms of, if she was a white woman, would she get better care? Would she get better health? Would she get better advice from a real doctor? Would she be able to afford a real hospitalized abortion? And so I'm going to add abortion into this because I think that contributes to how she is prejudiced against, because obviously she undergoes psychological issues from this operation and from the fact that she had little to no medical advice or assistance during this process. So I think that that is also an example of how medically she was prejudiced against. So I next want to go to a big aspect that I think is pretty prominent, and that would be not necessarily one night stands, but this idea of the fact that she is having sexual encounters and that she is lesbian. I think that she is more prejudiced against because she is an African American lesbian. That's such a small niche at the time that there's not as many people there for her to support her as she needs. So I think that that's a big aspect of how she is prejudiced against, too, also that she is an outlier in that sense. And although she does at one point have a group of women who support her after she overgoes a really bad breakup, she's kind of alone again. And that, I believe, kind of falls into this idea that she looks a lot different than normal people of the time. She has this curly hair. She looks kind of butch. She doesn't necessarily dress very womanly. And I think even just from a look standpoint, that definitely affects how she is perceived by society, and she is therefore prejudiced against for it. And that's all I've got for Zami. So I'm going to kind of transition into the next character from the Bluest Eye, Pecola. Okay, so the next part of my project is going to be focusing on Pecola in Toni Morrison's novel, The Bluest Eyes. So first, I'm going to start off with this photo of this young girl. So basically, at a young age, Pecola is stripped of her innocence because she is raped by her father. And this is a form of systematic racism because she is given no resources in order to cope with this. And also, her father, who is obviously psychologically inept and needs help, is not given any. The next thing I want to touch on is the marigold flowers. And so I have kind of all these different flowers. And a big part of the novel is the fact that Frida and Claudia plant these seeds and hope that they will thrive and live, as well as Pecola's baby. And these seeds, I believe, are a symbol because they represent that pretty much everyone except for Claudia and Frida wanted the baby to die. So essentially, this was another form of isolation that contributed to Pecola's deep-rooted psychological issues when an entire community abandoned her, besides two young girls. The next thing I want to add to the collage is this picture of the doorknob. So obviously, from the beginning, we're understood that this is a very poor, economically hurt area by the Great Depression, and that the housing here is very poor income, and particularly Pecola lives in an abandoned building, essentially, and this, honestly, I feel like contributes to the systematic inequality that she faces because she lives in a place that does not feel like a home, and there are not the means there to support her fully. The next word I want to add in is pure. So essentially, at a point in the novel, people have decided that because Pecola was raped, even though it was not her fault, she was the victim, therefore she is not pure and she no longer is a child and she shouldn't be treated like that. So people make fun of her, people mock her, people are rude to her, and it's just another form of systematic inequality. And this basically stems from systematic inequality within her own family because the men mistreat the woman in the family, and there's just arguments and unfair treatment of everybody involved, especially in a parent-to-child relationship. Next, I want to bring up the fact that she is a girl. So, because she is a girl, and because she's in this low economic area, and she's also a woman, she is more discriminated against, and it's made to look like it's her fault because she became pregnant even though she was raped. Obviously, these would be different implications if it was a boy we were talking about as opposed to a girl. And last but not least, I want to talk about maybe one of the biggest symbols in the book, and that is Pecola's want for blue eyes. So obviously, this is a form of systematic racism because since she is African American, she is made to feel like she is not as beautiful as a white girl with blue eyes. And it's something that haunts her throughout the entire novel. and contributes to the sense of isolation that she will never be beautiful enough, or she will never be perfect enough to her peers and to other members of her community and within her society. And so essentially you can see all these things that I've kind of laid out on here are contributing to this mix of social inequalities, and basically systematic racism is playing a part in the isolation of these two characters through all these different examples and all these different symbols. Thank you.